This isn't modest enough for a shared pool,
said Darlene Mott, vice president of the Westbridge Crossings HOA, as she reached for my daughter's shoulder. Before I could shout, she pulled down both straps of Morel's tankini, right there on the pool deck, in front of the other kids, in front of the other parents, in front of me. My daughter's arms snapped to her chest. Her eyes went wide. She took a step back like she'd been slapped. And Darlene. She just stood there, arms crossed, smug and righteous, like she'd just cleansed the neighborhood of sin. I didn't move, not as I was frozen, but because I knew something Darlene didn't. The entire pool deck was under audio-video surveillance, and I already had the access logs. If she'd waited one more minute, just one more minute. I'm Dr. Alaric Venn, ethics compliance investigator. I teach state agencies how to respond when authority figures violate bodily autonomy. This time, the victim wasn't a case number. It was my daughter. Subscribe if you've ever watched someone in power get away with something, as by the end of this story, she won't. I'll be submitting a formal incident report, I said, quietly enough that only Darlene could hear. She didn't blink. Submit whatever you want, Mr. Venn. Her swimwear violates our community modesty clause. The board has already approved. No, I cut in. You didn't approve anything, not by quorum, not by vote, and not with proper resident notice. I've read your last 3 minutes. That got her attention, a flicker of uncertainty. She stepped back, as if creating distance from the straps she'd just touched. Let me make this clear. I don't threaten. I document. I wasn't just some dad in flip-flops. I was the one who'd submitted the neighborhood's legal ethics review checklist last year when we moved in. The HOA had asked me to. They needed help with compliance. I didn't tell them I'd remember every clause they ignored. And this clause, the one Darlene weaponized against a 13-year-old girl, it didn't exist, but the strap did. My daughter's tankini was navy blue with a small stitched EV on the inside hem. Elisa Venn, her mother, my late wife. The woman who spent her last good month sewing suits for Morel's swim meets, as it helped her believe in a future she wouldn't get to see. That strap was all that remained of the last suit Elisa ever made, and that woman put her hands on it. The girl stood trembling next to the pool bench, not crying, not speaking, just staring at the space in front of her like something had snapped loose and wouldn't come back. The other parents, quiet, pretending not to see. One father shifted his sunglasses. Another mother walked away. But I saw one person freeze mid-motion. Syndrel Pace, the HOA-employed lifeguard, was halfway through setting out kickboards. Her jaw clenched, her grip tightened. Her eyes darted from Darlene to my daughter, then back. She said nothing. Not yet. "Let's go," I said to my daughter, wrapping her towel around her shoulders without touching her too fast. Darlene lifted her chin like she expected me to argue. You could shout, maybe swing, but that's not how this ends. You see, I already knew about the camera mounted above the diving blocks. The one Darlene forgot still logged 30-day footage retention. I knew the sheriff's office had a civil division for minors, and I already knew the modesty clause was printed in a version of the rules that had never been ratified. What I didn't know, yet, was how many girls she'd done this to. But I was about to find out, and this time, she was going to answer to more than just a committee. Darlene Mott didn't even flinch when the sheriff's office called her later that evening. I heard about it from a neighbor 2 doors down. Apparently, she answered the door with a smile, offered the deputy lemonade, and said, "There must be some mistake. I've always acted in the community's best interest." She wasn't worried. She was used to winning. Westbridge Crossings was the kind of neighborhood that punished silence. If you stayed quiet, you were safe. If you spoke up, you got letters, citations, fines, public scolding at board meetings. I'd heard about it before we moved in, but I thought that came with the territory. Order had a price. I didn't realize the price was my daughter's dignity. The next morning, a bright pink notice appeared on our mailbox. Modesty infraction, ongoing review. There was no contact number, no date, no appeal information. Just a check mark next to Morel's name and a handwritten note. Pool access suspended pending retraining. Retraining, I showed Very with. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at the paper like it might say something different if she blinked enough. Then she muttered, "So, I guess I don't get to swim this week." This week, the girl had a time trial coming up. If she couldn't train, she couldn't qualify. If she didn't qualify, she'd lose her spot on the regional circuit, maybe the state team. That had been her mom's dream before a cancer ended it. Verywith wanted it now, not just for herself, but for the woman who left her that embroidered strap like a signature on a future she still believed in. Retraining, I repeated, more to myself than her, as if being assaulted on deck wasn't enough. And that's when it clicked. Darlene wasn't just policing fashion, she was curating power. She'd turned HOA policy into a moral weapon and used it to humiliate children, girls specifically, under the protection of bylaws no one had ever voted on. I walked back inside and opened my laptop. I needed to see it for myself. The Westbridge Crossings Community Handbook had been amended last quarter. There it was, page 48, in a new section titled Appropriate Attire Standards. The phrase family-friendly dress code was repeated 6 times, but at the bottom of the page, in faint gray font, was a line that stopped me cold. Approved via Emergency Board Authority. See Addendum 4A. I searched the HOA public portal. Addendum 4A didn't exist, but someone had signed off on it. That signature would have a name, and that name would have a trail. I scrolled through the past 4 months of HOA meeting minutes. They were sparse, just typed agendas with checkboxes and vague notes like budget allocation discussed and holiday decor reviewed. Nothing about dress codes, nothing about emergency authority, until I hit March. There, at the bottom of a short paragraph about maintenance budget realignment, was a line, miscellaneous policy item introduced by D. Mott. Unanimous board support assumed. No objections recorded. Unanimous support assumed. No vote, no formal proposal. Just Darlene deciding and no one else standing up. That's how she did it. Not with signatures, not with law, with voiceless. And I knew that silence would be her undoing. When Morel finally broke her mute tension, it wasn't with anger. It was a single sentence. She does this to other girls, doesn't she? I didn't have proof yet, but I had a growing suspicion, and that suspicion got its first confirmation an hour later, when I stopped by the pool entrance to look at the corkboard. The community notices were the same as always. Water aerobics on Tuesdays, barbecue sign-up for Memorial Day, lost goggles, and a new sheet that hadn't been there before. A list, names, 10 of them, all girls. At the top, it said, pending modesty review, do not grant pool access without clearance. 8 of the girls were under 16. 1 was 11. The community had noticed. They just hadn't spoken. But I would, because this wasn't about swimwear. This was about control, and no one controls my daughter's body but her. Not while I'm still breathing. Syndrel Pace didn't look up when I stepped onto the pool deck the next morning. She stood by the maintenance closet, winding a frayed hose back into its coil like the task required all her attention. But I knew she saw me. Her shoulders tensed just slightly, the kind of reflex that comes from trying to pretend you're invisible. I didn't say her name. Not yet. The board had posted a new sign overnight. Parents not permitted on deck without approval. It was taped lopsided to the fence, printed in bold red font like it was an official warning, though the ink was still curling at the edges. There was no bylaw number beneath it. Another bluff, another power play. I stood just outside the gate and watched. A girl around 12, long braid, oversized goggles, stepped hesitantly toward the pool steps. Before her toe hit the water, Syndrel raised a hand and shook her head. The girl stopped. A woman behind her, probably her mother, took 1 step forward but said nothing. Then both turned around and walked away. Syndrel didn't look proud. She looked hollow. I waited until the deck cleared, until the last parent had disappeared around the hedges. Then I stepped forward and said, "You saw what she did to my daughter." Syndrel flinched. "I'm not asking you to speak in public," I added, voice even. "I'm asking if you're okay." She turned slowly, eyes heavy. There was a pause so long, I thought she might walk away. "She screamed after you left," she said quietly. "Your daughter. When Darlene walked away, Morel just let it out. I told her to breathe, but she didn't stop shaking. The image hit harder than I expected. I hadn't heard her cry. The girl had waited until I was out of earshot, held it in, buried it." Syndrel swallowed. "I cleaned the deck twice. I couldn't stop scrubbing. You saw her pull the straps." "Yes." "You know that's assault." She nodded once. "I watched her. Early 30s, sun-creased skin, hair pulled into a wet knot that hadn't been washed properly in days. Not fear, shame. The kind of shame that grows from knowing something's wrong and choosing silence anyway. "Why haven't you said anything?" I asked. "That last time I tried, she threatened to fire me," she said, jaw tight. "Said I'd forgotten who signs the paychecks. Told me I was lucky to have this job since I didn't finish college. I didn't ask what that had to do with anything. I already knew. Darlene used personal failures as leverage. Small-town surveillance wrapped in PTA smile. Probably smiled when she said it. She's targeting girls," I said. "There's a list with their names on it. I know. You know it's not enforceable. You know she falsified the meeting minutes." Sindrel looked away, but she didn't deny it. "I don't need you to testify today," I said. "But someone needs to confirm that what happened to my daughter wasn't an isolated mistake. Someone needs to confirm that this is a pattern." Her lips parted, but the words didn't come. Instead, she reached into her back pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, creased 4 ways and stained with chlorine. "I was supposed to shred it," she whispered. "It's the original board notes from the March meeting, the real ones. Darlene replaced the file in the binder last week." I took it without a word. The document was only 1 page long, handwritten, no mention of dress codes, no modesty clause. Just discussions about fertilizer rates and a motion to repair the front gate sensors. "Why did you keep this?" I asked. Sindrel blinked, her voice cracked. "After all, I thought someone like you might come along." I didn't have an answer for that. Not one I could say out loud. Instead, I folded the paper carefully and placed it inside my jacket. She didn't ask for a promise. She didn't need one. The truth was enough, for now. But in my chest, something sharp and hot had begun to harden. That Darlene hadn't just violated a child. She'd done it in front of someone who knew and counted on the wordless to hold. That silence had just been broken. The official violation notice came the next morning. This time it was on HOA letterhead, folded into an envelope and hand-delivered. A bright blue sticker sealed the flap. Community Standards Enforcement. They were trying to look official now, trying to scare me into playing along. Inside, the letter was worse than I expected. Due to repeated incidents of inappropriate swim attire and parental non-compliance, resident Morel Venn is prohibited from using all HOA amenities until completion of the Modesty and Family Standards Workshop, offered monthly by the HOA Disciplinary Committee. Non-compliance will result in further action, including but not limited to fines, gate access suspension, and HOA arbitration. I read it twice. Gate access suspension. That meant they could lock us out of our own neighborhood, over a swimsuit. I walked outside and looked at the gate from my driveway. For the first time, it didn't look like security. It looked like a threat, like a drawbridge that could be raised without warning. They weren't just shaming a child, they were escalating, using infrastructure and policy to tighten the grip. The girl came down the hall still in her robe. She saw the envelope and didn't ask, just stared at it, then sat at the kitchen island with her cereal. Her shoulders were drawn up like she was waiting to be told she'd done something wrong. I didn't show her the letter, not yet. Instead, I called the HOA office. A woman answered, not Darlene, just someone answering phones. I kept my voice level. "I'm requesting access to the March HOA board meeting audio log." A pause, paper shuffling. "Those aren't public recordings. They are when used to enforce a policy without majority approval. I'm invoking Section 3.4 of the Transparency Agreement, passed last July. The board uploaded it to the member portal. It requires audio archives be made available on request." She didn't argue, just said someone would call me back. They wouldn't. I knew that already. So I changed course. I drove to the office in person. The HOA building was small, 2 rooms, 1 copier, 1 dying ficus, and a framed poster of a smiling family playing cornhole on the front lawn. A man named Hal was there, mid-40s, wore a tie with short sleeves, looked like he was 1 email away from quitting. He didn't fight me when I asked to see the March meeting folder. He just gestured to the cabinet, said "top drawer," and went back to typing. Inside were the minutes Darlene had submitted. I scanned the page again. Same language, same note. Miscellaneous policy item introduced by D. Mott. Unanimous board support assumed. But this time, I noticed something else. A handwritten margin note, erased but still faint. We'll need Syndrel's verbal acknowledgement before finalizing. Finalizing. So she'd needed Syndrel to say something aloud, something on record to make it real, but she never got that. Because the moment never happened. That line wasn't recorded anywhere, and that meant the entire clause was hanging by an assumption. I took out my phone and opened my files. The document Syndrel had given me, the real minutes, had a different ending entirely. I snapped a side-by-side photo and sent it to my own inbox. Then I looked at Hal and asked, "Who else has access to these?" He shrugged. "Just board officers, and sometimes Syndrel if there's maintenance stuff to add." "Who adds the final signatures?" "Usually Darlene. She types it up, adds the initials, and uploads it." That was all I needed. This wasn't a clerical error, this was deliberate. I left without saying another word and stepped out into the parking lot. The sun had just broken through the clouds, and the heat hit harder than I expected. My shirt stuck to my back, but I barely noticed. After all, I wasn't just angry anymore. I was certain. They escalated, and now I would. I didn't sleep that night, not properly. I stayed up cross-referencing documents, policy timestamps, and signature trails, replaying the moment Morel stood frozen with her straps around her arms. Every thread I pulled led back to Darlene Mott, and each knot she tied was wrapped in mute tension omissions. Not lies, just silence wrapped in confidence, documented just enough to seem clean. But sometime around 2 a.m., I found it. It wasn't in the minutes, it wasn't in the portal, it was in the metadata. Syndrel's original document, the one she handed me in secret, had been scanned on March 12th. The file Darlene uploaded to the resident portal said it was finalized March 9th. Finalized. 3 days before the meeting even took place. The policy didn't just fail to pass a vote. It was predated, entered into the system with fabricated metadata to look legitimate before discussion ever happened. That was enough. I saved a copy. I exported a screenshot. I created a zip file, labeled everything in plain folders, and backed it up to 2 separate cloud drives and a USB. I didn't need speculation. I needed the clean trail, digital fingerprints of intent. The next morning, I drove straight to the county building. The sheriff's department shared the first floor with civil services and municipal records. It smelled like linoleum and toner, like old carpet and cold coffee. The woman at the front desk asked if I was reporting a traffic incident. "No," I said, "civil battery involving a minor." That got her attention. They took me into a side office. Sheriff Laura Hammett came in 10 minutes later. Dark blazer, badge on her belt. The kind of posture that said she'd seen worse but didn't like being forced to look at it. I laid out everything, slowly, calmly, and with no embellishment. "I'm not here as a father," I told her. "I'm here as a Title IX compliance officer and civil ethics investigator. What was done to my daughter wasn't just morally wrong. It was actionable." She listened without interrupting, took notes, watched me, not just my evidence. When I showed her the clip of Darlene pulling down the swimmer straps, she didn't blink, but she wrote something in the margin of her notebook and underlined it twice. Then I handed her the documents, both versions of the HOA minutes, the scan dates, the metadata screenshots. The list of minor girls was restricted from the pool. When I finished, she sat back and asked, "Do you believe this was systemic targeting?" "Yes." "You're not the first to file a complaint," she said, flipping back 2 pages in her notebook. "But you're the first with evidence." That hit harder than it should have. Someone else had tried, someone else had come forward, and without proof, they'd been ignored, written off. That wouldn't happen this time. "I'd like to open a formal report," I said, "not just for battery, for pattern behavior and falsification of a governance documents. You'll find both in the HOA's filing system. I've also submitted a mirrored copy to the State HOA Oversight Commission." Hammett raised an eyebrow. "You really are an investigator." "This time, I just happen to be the father, too." She nodded and stood. "I'll need to speak with your daughter." "She's 13. I'll sit in." "And the lifeguard who gave you this?" she asked, holding up the original notes. "She's scared, but she'll talk. Just not yet." Hammett tucked the files into a manila folder. "That's enough for now." I left the building feeling colder than when I entered. But not weak, not shaken. This wasn't over. It was finally beginning. Darlene had built her fortress on assumptions. She never expected anyone to question the foundation. Now the sheriff had the blueprints. I expected pushback. What I didn't expect was escalation. The day after I met with the sheriff's office, someone dumped a stack of red HOA citations on my porch. No envelope, no explanation. Just rubber banded together, half crumpled, sitting next to Morell's shoes like a silent message. 7 violations, all dated the same morning. Improper trash bin alignment. Unapproved planter dimensions. Parking too close to curb markings. Lack of holiday-neutral seasonal decor. One of them cited a missing mailbox reflector. Ours had been intact for years. They were grasping. That's how you know they're scared. I didn't call. I documented. I lined each citation up on my kitchen counter, took overhead photos, logged time stamps, matched each to the HOA's own visual ordinances. Then I walked them out to the trash bin they claimed was misaligned and snapped one final photo. The reflector. Still there. Still glowing. By noon, our gate key card had stopped working. The swimmer found out first. She called me. From the other side of the Westbridge entrance, out of breath and near tears. It just blinked red, she said. Everyone else got through. It beeped 3 times and wouldn't open. I told her to wait, drove fast. When I arrived, she was standing next to the keypad like a lost child outside a grocery store. Her swim bag hung heavy off her shoulder, and I could see that strap, peeking out from under the towel. I tapped my card. Nothing. That's when I knew. Darlene was making this personal. The citations weren't noise, they were buildup. She wanted a confrontation, one she could spin as aggression, one that would make me look unstable. I didn't give it to her. Instead, I filed an emergency complaint with the County Oversight Board. Title: Retaliatory Denial of Access Following Civil Complaint. I attached the security footage, the fabricated minutes, the sheriff's case number, and a photo of my daughter standing outside the gate with her bag. It was more than enough. That night, I sat with Morell on the back patio. She didn't ask what was happening. She just stared up at the stars and said, "Mom would have hated it here." "She would have hated Darlene," I said. "She wouldn't have let her touch me." "She didn't," I said. "That suit you wear, she's in it." I didn't say it to comfort her. I said it after all. I believed it. That strap held more than elastic and thread. It held the promise of protection. Protection that Darlene tried to strip away in front of everyone, thinking no one would stop her. She didn't know who I was. Not really. The next morning, I got a call from Sheriff Hammett. "We've reviewed the full footage," she said. "Our office has submitted it to the DA for preliminary review. We're also opening a secondary case involving the HOA board's conduct." She paused. "We'd like to speak with the lifeguard, Ms. Pace." "She's willing," I said, "but she's still scared. Tell her she won't be alone. We'll record her statement privately." I hung up and stood there for a while, staring at the closed gate beyond our front window. I knew what I had to do next. Sindrel wasn't just a witness. She was the hinge, and it was time for the door to swing wide open. Sindrel answered on the 3rd knock. She didn't invite me in, but she didn't close the door either. Her apartment sat above a detached garage on the far end of the neighborhood, technically part of the HOA boundaries, but far enough from the pool that she rarely got unannounced visits. A folding chair and half-dead fern guarded the threshold. The place looked lived in, but not loved. I held up my phone. "Sheriff Hammett asked to speak with you. She said it would be private. No press, no board access." Sindrel didn't take the phone. She looked past me toward the street, toward the manicured cul-de-sac that had been trained to keep its secrets behind closed doors and rolled down blinds. "She called me too," she said quietly. "Left a voicemail. I deleted it." "You're not the one on trial," I said. "But you are the one who gets to say this isn't just about my daughter. You get to make it real." Sindrel leaned against the doorframe. Her hands were red from chlorine and cracked at the knuckles. She looked older than she had by the pool, like carrying silence had aged her in just a few days. "I used to love that job," she said. "Kids learning to swim, parents cheering from the side. Felt like it mattered, you know?" "It still does," I said, "but only if someone stops the rot before it sinks the whole place." She laughed once, bitter and low. "You sound like you're giving a seminar." I knew it. The same tone I used when explaining ethics violations to a room of government officials who thought policies were suggestions. But this wasn't policy. This was personal. Morell's name wasn't a bullet point. Her trauma wasn't a case study. I changed tack. You remember that strap Darlene grabbed? Sindrel nodded once. It was hand-sewn by my daughter's mom, my wife, 2 months before she passed. It's got her initials stitched inside the hem. I waited. Sindrel's lips pressed together. Her gaze flicked to the floor. You were there, I said. You heard her scream. Yes. You knew the modesty clause wasn't real. Yes. You knew Darlene forged the minutes. Another pause. Yes. I'm not asking you to testify in court, I said. I'm asking you to say what you already know, to someone who can act on it. Sindrel turned away from the door, disappeared for a second, then returned holding a slim plastic folder. Inside it was a printed timeline. Dates, incidents, citations, all handwritten in tight looping print. I started keeping track last fall, she said. First it was warnings, then restricted access, then came the retraining policy. Darlene made it sound official, but there was never a vote. I flipped through it. Each entry had a name, most of them girls. Ages ranged from 11 to 15. Several were marked with asterisks, crying, parent confrontation, suit changed mid-visit. This is your statement, I said. It's more than enough. Sindrel wrapped her arms around herself, like giving it away had left her hollow. You think she'll go to jail? I think she'll finally have to face someone who doesn't answer to her. She didn't smile, but something shifted behind her eyes, the first crack in a long-held wall. She used to tell me I'd never get hired again if I crossed her, that people like me don't bounce back from bad references. She's right about one thing, I said. This is on the record now. There's no going back. I don't want to go back, she said. I just want it to stop. It will. I meant it. I took the folder. I turned to go. Before I reached the stairs, she said, Tell Morel I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. I stopped, looked back. Tell her yourself, I said. Then I left the weight of wordless behind and carried the truth forward. I didn't waste time. The moment I got home, I scanned Sindrel's folder. Every entry, every name, every note. I didn't alter a single word. Then I encrypted the file, appended the metadata logs from the HOA's falsified documents, and cross-linked everything with the sheriff's case number. When I was done, I had a clean, airtight packet. Statement of Pattern Misconduct, Westbridge HOA. I labeled it exactly that. By nightfall, I had sent it to 3 places: Sheriff Hammett, the county's Civil Rights Compliance Office, and the North Carolina Department of Regulatory Oversight for Homeowner Associations. I knew the people who ran that last one. I'd given trainings there 3 years ago. They'd take it seriously. But this wasn't just about sending reports anymore. Darlene had closed off the gates. She had isolated the girl from her training, used the HOA's infrastructure to punish a child for standing still when she was humiliated. What she hadn't counted on was me knowing the system better than she did. So I began preparing the one thing most HOAs feared more than lawsuits: external audit intervention. There's a clause in our local regulations. If a registered HOA board is found to have altered procedural votes, applied sanctions without lawful authority, or retaliated against residents using infrastructure denial, the county HOA Oversight Office is empowered to place the board under provisional review. That's the first step toward state-supervised dissolution. It's rare, but it exists. And now it had a name attached: Darlene Mott. I crafted my petition for emergency review, not from me personally, from my profession, my letterhead, my state credentials, my advisory status with 2 compliance committees. I framed it around risk exposure, governance fraud, and pattern-based targeting of minors. I included the list of names Sindrel had logged and added excerpts from 3 HOA newsletters where Darlene had used coded language like preserving traditional family aesthetics. She never thought anyone would read those closely. I read everything. By morning, I had my reply, a formal notice from the Office of HOA Oversight. They were opening a preliminary file and requesting a joint site visit in cooperation with the Sheriff's Department. It wouldn't be public, not yet, but it was real. I walked into Morel's room. She was sitting on her floor, stretching, earbuds in. Her goggles sat on the dresser, right next to the swim bag she hadn't touched in a week. Hey, I said, crouching beside her. I filed a review petition with the county. It's moving. We're going to get the gate access reinstated and the workshop canceled. She nodded, slowly, like she wanted to believe it, but wasn't ready to hope yet. I also spoke to your coach, I added. Told him what's been happening. He said if we can get you in a pool this week, he'll still count your time trial. She looked up. You're serious? I'm always serious when it's about you. But the HOA, they don't own water, I said, and they sure as hell don't own you. Her smile was small, but it was there. That night, I emailed Sheriff Hammett one last time, told her I was preparing to submit the full video report to the HOA board directly, formally, and with procedural language. I knew she was still building her case, but I also knew the moment had come to start setting traps in plain sight. Let them see me coming. After all, unlike Darlene, I didn't need shadows to win. I had facts, I had testimony, and now I had motion on the record. The next board meeting was in 48 hours, and I planned to attend. The day before the board meeting, I made one final pass through every piece of documentation. The goal wasn't to find more. It was to make sure what I had couldn't be picked apart. I cross-checked signatures, scanned timestamps, and matched the handwriting from the real minutes Syndrel gave me to the public version Darlene submitted. The forged version had a cleaner layout, sure, but it had one fatal flaw. The lowercase g in her draft looped inward. The one in Syndrel's copy curled sharp and open. Whoever retyped the minutes didn't notice, but handwriting analysis software did. I wasn't bringing opinions. I was bringing a forensic comparison. That evening, I reached out to Syndrel one last time, just to be sure she was still willing. I'm not backing out, she said, but I'm not standing up at the meeting. You don't have to, I told her. You already did the hard part. She paused. They won't expect you to go public. No, I said, but they'll see what I've made sure can't be ignored. I printed everything, not for drama, for permanence. A hard copy in hand carries a kind of weight that a screen never will. I also brought duplicates, one for the sheriff's liaison, one for the HOA council, assuming they had one smart enough to show up. Then I made my last stop. The community printer was tucked inside the small Westbridge Commons building, just off the tennis courts. I rarely used it, but Darlene did. Her print logs showed up on the public feed when they forgot to restrict permissions 2 years ago. I remembered given that she used it to print 50 spring modesty policy flyers, back when she first tried to shame kids into dress codes. I logged in and queued my documents. As I waited, I heard 2 women talking near the entryway. Mute tension. Sharp. I heard someone complain to the county about the pool stuff. Probably that Venn guy. His daughter didn't even cry. That's not what I heard. Lifeguard said she had to sit with her until she calmed down. You think he's really going to show up tomorrow? I think if he does, Darlene will eat him alive. I didn't speak, just waited for the printer to finish, picked up the warm stack, and walked past them with a nod. Neither met my eyes. Good. Let them think I was walking into a buzzsaw. Let them underestimate what I'd built. Back home, I laid everything out on the dining room table. Morel helped, quietly, but with focus. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. Her eyes scanned the highlighted lines like she already knew the truth and just wanted confirmation the world would catch up. She paused when she saw one of the names on Syndrel's list. I know her, she said. She got yelled at last summer. Her top had pineapples on it. I looked closer. Emma T., age 12, cited for unseemly iconography. Jesus, Darlene really believed she was saving the neighborhood from fruit patterns. The girl traced the edge of the paper with her fingertip. She stopped coming after that. She'll come back, I said, only if you win. I looked at my daughter, not the little girl in goggles, but the hushed fire underneath, the one who didn't scream until no one could hear her, the one who'd swallowed it all just to keep walking. I owed her more than a confrontation. I owed her a finish line. That night, I ironed my shirt. I packed the documents in a hard-shell folder. I charged my phone, my backup recorder, and my camera pen. Not because I planned to use them, but given that Darlene needed to know if she thought dragging my daughter into shame would be buried by unspoken. Then tomorrow, she'd learn what a father with credentials, receipts, and nothing left to lose actually looked like. Let them brace for anger. I was bringing truth. The board meeting began like they always did. Half-hearted chatter, stale cookies on folding tables, and the soft buzz of a malfunctioning AC vent. But this time, the room felt heavier, as if the walls themselves had caught wind of what was coming. It was held in the Westbridge Community Hall, just off the pool entrance. Rows of gray plastic chairs had been set up for residents. maybe 20 total. Most of them were half full. Some families leaned together, whispering. Others stared at the front like they were watching the start of a funeral. Darlene Mott stood behind the center table, in her pale yellow cardigan and matching lipstick, flipping through her agenda packet like she didn't already know what was in it. Her nameplate read, Vice President, but she carried herself like the title was carved in stone. To her left sat Board Treasurer Lana Price, who avoided eye contact with the room. On her right, 2 vacant seats. They hadn't even bothered to fill them. That was telling. I sat in the second row, not front and center. I didn't need the spotlight. I needed angles, visibility, and a clean line of sight to the board's reaction when it all landed. Darlene tapped the mic. We'll begin tonight's meeting with Agenda Item 1, Landscaping Budget Overruns. She spoke like it mattered, like bushes were the problem. Item 2 was parking enforcement near the tennis courts. 3 was seasonal signage for the July 4th parade. She was stalling. Everyone knew why we were here, but she was trying to smother it under policy trivia and budget notes. I let her. I let her bury herself in procedural fluff until she finally looked up and said, "If there's no further input on preliminary items, we'll move to board concerns." I stood. "Point of procedural motion," I said. She blinked, then smiled, tight, dismissive. "Mr. Venn, homeowners may speak during resident comment, not during board review." "Actually," I replied, stepping into the aisle, Section 2.6 of the HOA Charter allows a resident to introduce a grievance motion when it pertains to personal safety or discriminatory enforcement. Both apply. Her smile faltered. Several people turned in their chairs. "I'm submitting an official grievance for immediate board review," I continued, holding up the sealed folder, "containing evidence of falsified policy implementation, misuse of HOA authority, and physical misconduct involving a minor." Morel sat behind me. She didn't move, but I could feel her attention, steady and unblinking. Darlene's fingers curled around her pen. "If you believe there's been a misunderstanding, there's no misunderstanding," I said. "There's footage, there are documents, and there's sworn testimony from your own employee verifying the policy you enforced never passed a legal vote." Whispers broke out across the rows. Darlene cleared her throat, louder this time. "The board reserves the right to delay resident grievances for formal review." "You delayed nothing," I said. "You bypassed a vote, manipulated meeting records, and physically touched a child under the guise of a fabricated dress code." I stepped forward and placed the folder on the table in front of her. "And now," I added, "the county sheriff and the Department of HOA Oversight have opened an inquiry. This is your chance to respond before the rest of it becomes public record." Lana Price shifted in her seat. Across the room, Syndrel Pace walked in. Quiet. Alone. She didn't speak. Just stood by the door and watched. Darlene flipped open the folder. I watched her eyes scan the list of girls, the comparison minutes, the handwriting notes, the metadata. I watched her face tighten. Then she looked up at me and said, "We'll need time to verify these claims." "No," I said calmly. "You don't have time." Because behind her, the community hall doors opened again, and in walked 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies, plainclothes investigator Hammett just behind them, badge clipped to her belt. Now the room went hushed, dead still. And, for the first time in weeks, Darlene Mott stopped talking. No one moved. Sheriff Hammett stepped into the room like she'd been here before. Her presence didn't demand attention. It removed it. Conversations died mid-breath. The back row straightened up. Even the usual whisperers went silent. Darlene's hands hovered over the folder I'd just handed her. The top page, a direct comparison of the meeting minutes, lay visible under the fluorescent lights, the forged signature faintly outlined beneath the real one Syndrel had preserved. Hammett didn't go to the mic. She didn't need to. She walked straight to the board table and said, "Vice President Mott, I'd like to speak with you about an incident involving minor Myrelle Venn and the March HOA policy amendment you personally filed." Darlene drew herself up like she was still in control. "This isn't the proper venue for legal matters, Deputy." "Then I suggest you answer in private," Hammett replied, voice even. "Or we can proceed in public record." Gasps fluttered through the seats. Darlene's eyes darted to Lana Price, but Lana wasn't backing her. She hadn't said a word all evening. Her face was pale, palms flattened against her knees. She was done pretending. "This is a community meeting," Darlene said, louder now. "You have no jurisdiction here." "I do when the conduct of a registered HOA official involves physical contact with a minor and falsified public governance documents," Hammett replied. She turned her body slightly so the entire room could hear her clearly. "We've reviewed testimony from a board-affiliated employee, a formal grievance submission, surveillance footage recorded by HOA cameras, and 2 conflicting versions of official minutes filed under your account credentials." A murmur rippled across the room. Shock, recognition, the clinking collapse of an illusion. Someone in the front row muttered, "So it's true." Darlene pushed her chair back. "If you're accusing me of something, you'd better be prepared to prove it." "I don't have to," Hammett said. "You already did." She reached into her coat and pulled out a USB drive, then looked over her shoulder to a staff member at the hall's back wall. "Projector, please." A screen dropped from the ceiling. Darlene went rigid. "No," she said, voice hard. "You can't play that." The lights dimmed automatically. The projector blinked once, then displayed a grainy but clear video feed of the pool deck. March 18th, 3:47 p.m. Morel stood near the bench, arms relaxed, adjusting her towel. Darlene walked into frame from the left, said something, inaudible on the outdoor mic, then reached forward and grabbed both straps, yanking them down. The sound cut in just long enough to capture a sharp, guttural noise from the girl, the kind of sound no child should ever have to make. And then I appeared, on screen, just steps too late. The video froze on, Darlene's hand still in motion. The room was silent. No breath. No shift. Just a collective stillness as the air changed the weight. Hammett's voice cut through it like a scalpel. "Vice President Mott, you're being placed under investigative hold, pending formal charges for civil battery, procedural misconduct, and obstruction of governance. Please stand." Darlene didn't move. "I didn't hurt her," Darlene snapped too late. "It was just a correction. She was exposed. She violated the code." "There was no code," I said, stepping forward. "You made it up. Your daughter was 13, I said, calm and final, "and you put your hands on her." Hammett nodded to her deputies. One step behind Darlene, the other moved toward the aisle. Lana Price stood suddenly. I didn't know she changed the files." "No one's talking to you right now, Lana," Darlene hissed, voice unraveling. "You didn't let me see the final version," Lana said louder. "You just said it was done." Hammett raised a hand. "Everyone will have the opportunity to give statements, but not tonight." The deputies helped Darlene to her feet. She didn't resist, not exactly. Just stood stiff, fists clenched, eyes burning holes into the screen that still showed her hand mid-action. As she passed me, she stopped for half a breath. "You've ruined everything." I met her stare without flinching. "No," I said. "You did. I just made sure no one could look away from it." And then she was gone, escorted out under the fluorescent lights she used to rule beneath. The room stayed still long after the doors shut behind her. The next morning, I found Morel already awake, sitting at the edge of the pool with her legs in the water. She hadn't said much since the meeting. She didn't need to. She'd heard the silence in that room, the stunned still when Darlene's voice finally broke under the weight of everything she'd built on lies. Syndrel was there too, unlocking the storage shed like it was just another morning. No police, no shouting. Just normalcy slowly coming back, piece by piece. "Lane 4's yours," she said to my daughter without turning. "It's been waiting." The swimmer nodded once, then stood and pulled off her sweatshirt. Underneath was the same navy tankini, the one with the strap her mother had stitched, initials still faded but visible. She stepped onto the platform, no hesitation this time. She dove. The sound of her body slicing into the water made my throat tighten. The echo of it carried more weight than any speech I could have made. Her arms cut clean, legs followed, and for the first time in a week, the pool belonged to her again. When she surfaced, she didn't look at me. She didn't need to. Her head tilted back, her eyes to the sky, and she smiled, brief, breathless, and real. Sheriff Hammett called that afternoon. "Formal charges are proceeding," she said. "Battery, falsification of public records, and retaliatory HOA abuse. The DA's office is filing paperwork today." I thanked her. She didn't linger. She'd done her part. We both had. Later that week, the County Oversight Board released their finding. Westbridge Crossings HOA had violated 3 procedural bylaws and failed to adhere to transparency statutes. The board was placed under external audit. Darlene's seat was vacated. Sindrel was promoted to interim facilities director at resident request. But that wasn't the part that stayed with me. What stayed was this. 2 days after the charges became public, a new flyer appeared on the corkboard by the pool gate. It wasn't printed in red. It wasn't sealed with stickers. It didn't threaten fines or consequences. It was handwritten in blocky black marker. You don't have to be afraid anymore. We're watching together now. No signature, no header, just that. A week later, 3 of the girls on Sindrel's list showed up with their parents, still unsure, but they came. And when they stepped onto the pool deck, no one stopped them. Given that there was no one left to enforce the fear, the swimmer swam every morning after that. She didn't speak much about what happened, but I saw it in the way she adjusted her goggles, never rushed, never flinching. The way she held herself when walking the length of the deck. The strap didn't define her, but she wore it like it mattered again. And for me, there was no speech, no victory lap. Just a moment at the kitchen table the night after the board dissolution. Very slid a small envelope toward me. Inside was the original fabric swatch, navy, soft, stitched with her mother's initials. "I'm ready to switch suits," she said, "but I want this one framed." So I did. Hung it by the door, just beside the key rack, a reminder, not of what Darlene did, but of what Morel survived and what we refused to let stand. If this story hits something in you, if you've ever seen power used to unspoken instead of protect, drop a comment. Let me know where you're watching from. We're not just neighbors anymore.